Time is 4:39. You're listening to News Talk 710 KURV. Big Monday K-Ondas to you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Zack and Davis, along with the living legend Davis Rankin on your 956 drive home. We are your home for coverage of the NFL from Westwood One. That's right, the big game Sunday, February 12th, made possible by F&T Valley Motorsports, Philly 77, and top lawyer Jay Gonzalez. There is a potential shakeup in the discussion over school choice. And my next guest says, hey, we need to stop throwing money at the existing system. Let's shake things up a little bit. Joining us on 710 KURV, we welcome back to the program Alexander Salter with Texas Tech, part of the business school there. He joins us now. So what needs to change in the school system currently?
First, thanks for having me back. It's great to be here. I really think that we're at an inflection point in Texas. We've had school choice bills in the past get close to the finish line, but they never quite could make it. I think now, given all the things that are happening all across the country and right here in Texas, we really do have the momentum to get an educational financing bill that allows funding to follow the students rather than being trapped in a system, because we need something to shake up the education system so they can actually deliver results for parents and for children.
I guess we should set the stage a little bit here. So how does the existing system work, and what's wrong with it?
The existing system largely assigns students to schools based on location, based on zip code. Wherever you live, there's your school system, and that basically determines the schools that you're going to go to for elementary, middle, high school. Now, there is some flexibility there. Depending on the district that you live in, you may have an option of public schools. But what I would like to see, and what many people in Texas would like to see, in fact, 88% of Texas Republican voters would like to see this, is actually have the state's resources follow the student and be used for approved educational expenses, either at private schools, for homeschooling, microschooling, any sort of educational option that can get our students to where they need to be. Because what we've been observing the last couple of years is that funding per student keeps on going up, but student outcomes aren't improving. So I think that rather than throw money at the existing system, we really need to get behind a school choice bill and bring it home.
Alexander Salter is an economics professor at Texas Tech University, our guest on your 956 drive home. Davis Rankin, your question, sir.
What do you see wrong with the existing system? What is it that compels you to take the position you have? I guess what's your indictment?
I don't think that it's flexible enough. I don't think that it's this kind of solution that works for enough Texas students. I actually don't think that public schools are a failure. I think that for the right student and the right circumstances, they can be an appropriate option. But there are also lots of students who would learn better in a learning environment more tailored to their needs. It should be the responsibility of the state government to make sure that every student has the resources necessary to pursue a top-notch education. But that's not necessarily the same thing as having all students go to a government school. So I think what a school choice bill would do, which again allows the state's per pupil funding to actually follow the student to a preferred educational option of their family's choice, would do is put each and every student in a position where they're actually going to be able to succeed in their educational environment. And let's be honest, for a lot of kids, they're going to continue to use the existing public school system. And that's great. They should if that works for them. But what we also want is to give students for whom that is not working great an option to pursue a private schooling option, a homeschooling option, learning pods, collaborative academies, out-of-school tutoring, all these things that can and should be done with public resources to help invest in the next generation of workers and leaders.
So let me encapsulate really quickly, just to be sure that we're all on the same page. So what you're saying is we're handing out money by the head anyway. Right? Each kid gets an allotted amount of money in the school system. Why can't the parent just take that money and move it towards whatever school that they choose, correct?
That's the long and short of it. There's a big, hairy formula that determines how much each district gets per pupil, determined by average daily attendance and a bunch of other factors. The fraction of the financing that's provided from property taxes out of the local school district versus the central government in Austin, that's a little bit different. But the basic story is correct. We already have per pupil funding. The question is, should it be trapped in the existing system, which basically assigns students to schools by residential zip code or location, or should we actually have the flexibility that we can take that money and transfer it to an educational option, and that in the family's estimates works better for their students and for their children? And I'm definitely in column B.
Our guest on 710 KURV is Alexander Salter, an economics professor in the Rolls College of Business at Texas Tech University. Davis Rankin, I'm sorry, I interrupted your question. Go ahead.
My belief, if I'm wrong about this predicate, please let me know. One of the primary arguments for charter schools is this would unleash the potential of people who had a different way of educating. They weren't trapped into the existing system. They could experiment. This would give them the opportunity to experiment. Public schools, it'd be public schools with public dollars. And without, I don't know how kids are doing. I had a friend who's, so I don't know whether this is bearing fruit or not. But one thing we do know is that the rules that apply to a local school district, independent or consolidated school district, do not apply to charter schools. The local school has to have a transparent budget, and you can find out how they're spending their money. You cannot do that if the charter schools, I don't know what they have to do to obscure that part of their funding, but I think you know what I'm talking about. It's been in the news. Houston Chronicle did a story about people involved in these charter schools, like renting the buildings from themselves, kind of thing. Why wouldn't your solution reinforce that?
It changes the responsibility mechanism. There are multiple ways that we can think about accountability. And one way that we can think about accountability is what the public schools do. They have a very open, deliberative process with respect to some things. They can be very secretive about other things, and we can talk about that if there's time. But what this would do, whether we're talking about a voucher bill or an education savings account, which is even more flexible, is actually put the decision authority in the hands of families themselves, in the hands of parents themselves. And that actually works a lot of ways that we make other important decisions, right? When you choose a doctor, you choose a PCP, you find one that you think you might like, you go a few times, and if it turns out that it's not working out, you find a different provider that works better for your needs. That's a responsibility mechanism. It's decentralized, it's flexible, it's bottom up rather than top down, and I don't think that there's any compelling argument for why that shouldn't apply to how we choose education. And I think the studies on this bear this out. If you actually look at the effectiveness of school choice, the social scientific literature is actually pretty strong, suggesting that, yeah, participant scores for students in school choice programs, their test scores go up. Taxpayers save money, parent satisfaction through the roof. It even improves test scores for students in public schools because of the downstream competitive effect. So this is one of those things that I think is a tide that lifts all boats. And again, we're not trying to find a one-size-all education model, right? We're not proposing switching from one-size-fits-all public to one-size-fits-all private. We're looking for a reform that can encourage a multiplicity of education options, an experiment, if you will, to figure out what works best for actual families sending their kids to real educational institutions.
Alexander Salter is a professor at Texas Tech University. He's got an article out on National Review titled, "It's Time for Texas to Embrace School Choice." He's our guest on your 956 Drive Home. And what you hear a lot from the guys that are kind of pushing against school choice is this is going to take away money from schools that are already hurting for funding, and they're already frustrated. The teachers are underpaid. They're overworked, they're not appreciated, and this is just going to exacerbate the problem. What do you say to that?
I think that some of those complaints are legitimate. I would just say that I think that school choice is going to do the opposite. Let's talk about teacher compensation, right? We need to actually figure out what are the effects of having a competitive educational selection environment on the compensation and salary of teachers. Now, this is one of the less explored areas in the school choice literature, but it turns out that there have been several studies done on this. And surprisingly, it turns out that school choice actually modestly increases teacher salaries. And it does that by giving teachers additional options. Because when you create this other environment where other learning models and other learning institutions can flourish, that gives teachers more options for where they want to work, where they want to teach kids. And so that's basically why we observe this secondary effect. Now, it's not huge. We're not taking teachers and giving them a potload of money. Right, we definitely can and should continue to talk about effects to better compensate teachers in the public school system. But I still think it's pretty remarkable that based on the evidence that we have, school choice is good not just for students, but for teachers too. And a lot of time you hear people say things like, well, school choice defunds the public education system. I don't think that that's how it works. The way that it works is by having the dollars for a public purpose, right? Having an educated populace is the public purpose authorized in the Texas Constitution. What we're talking about now is the best way to actually achieve that goal. Now, a lot of places might actually see a fair number of students take the option and actually use a voucher or an education savings account and go for a private school or after-school tutoring or homeschooling or something like that. But then there are also areas, rural areas especially, where, frankly, there aren't going to be that many students leaving the existing school system, and so things are going to remain largely unchanged. I think that we need to stop talking about school choice like it's going to fundamentally upend and destroy public schooling, because it's just not true. School choice in the form of transferable financing is a complement to the existing school system. It's not a substitute for it.
This is Davis Rankin again. The Republicans, rural Republicans, it is said, have consistently resisted any change in, like you're suggesting. The governor says he's going to take care of them; they don't have to worry about it. How does that work? And what would stop a charter schools from going in then and try to suck off students into their operation?
Mm-hmm. I think that those fears are coming from good intentions. I think their heart is in the right place, but I just don't think the story that they're telling makes a lot of sense. Right? Think about what's going on in a rural community. You basically have to believe that there is a half dozen private schools just waiting for a school choice bill to pass, and then they're going to open up a new deal and completely defund like the public education system there. Is that how it's going to work? No, it's almost certainly not how it's going to work. Precisely because rural students don't have access to as many outside options, that's where we would see the least effect. Mm-hmm. And rural district representatives actually acknowledge this, because in the same breath, they'll say, well, school choice is unfair because rural students don't have as many options as urban students. But then they'll say at the same time, if you open it up, then rural school districts are just going to go underwater. Well, both of those things can't be true. They contradict each other. It has to be one or the other. And I think that in all plausibility, the way that it's going to work is school choice is going to shake up some underperforming districts, specifically urban underperforming districts, while keeping rural districts largely intact. Is there going to be some substitution out of the public schooling system into homeschooling or other arrangements? Yeah, sure, there's going to be some. Is there going to be enough to threaten the integrity of the system? No, no way. It's just not plausible.
Professor Salter, thanks a lot for stopping by and breaking it down for us. We appreciate your time as usual. That's Alexander Salter, professor of economics at Texas Tech University, joining us on News Talk 710 KURV.